monk chat with Ajahn Brahm, and at 4:30. So we were aiming to be finished by 4 to be able to have a half-hour break. We might be able to go 15 minutes more than that if we wished, but
I wrote to you before this meeting.
on that, I think, the end of our time today.
Hello?
Yes?
I wrote to you before this meeting that I
Yes?
would like to first do the training
Yes?
and then reserve 40 minutes for the discussion and decision about the date of this year's Katina. Does that seem all right for you?
I feel like I feel like, especially for there to be needed translation and questions and discussion, that 40 minutes for that is short.
So 1 hour for that?
Okay.
So then the class will go until 3 o'clock and then we'll go to the discussion.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. So now we'll have study hall. Did you want to have it? We just give this time for us individually to study ourselves right now.
Isn't that what study hall is?
If you just know which, whether A or B, then the answer will be yes.
I didn't understand the question.
Last time we had a kind of interactive study hall. Were you aiming for that, or would you like us to just silently study each themselves during this time?
Well, if anybody was able to open the document, they could look at the questions and they could click on a hint which would show them where the answer is to their question. So for example, the first question.
We have it on our screen. Yeah.
Let me just, we're not going to have time for people to study this and to work with it as I had designed. I had come up with some questions that I thought, as the trainees, if you're successful at the end of the class or at the end of the training, you'll know the answer to those questions. Then I had pasted right into the document from Sutta Central the key sections from the Kandakas and the Vibhanga that gives the explanation about Katina. And I had done it all in one document with the idea that as people work with this material, they would be able to make notes on the shared document, ask questions to the shared document, and so forth like that, so that the shared document becomes a shared learning experience. When you're looking at Sutta Central, you don't have that opportunity. So the key documents are Khandaka 7, Parivara 16, the Bhikkhu Nisagya Pachitya 1, which equals Bhikkhuni 13, the Bhikkhuni Nisagya Pachitya 2, the Bhikkhus Nisagya Pachitya 28, which equals the Bhikkhunis 29 on the cloth given in haste, and then Pachitya 29 and 30. Those were the most important places that had any information relating to the Katina.
Sadhu, what an awesome resource. Thank you so much for preparing that for all of us and offering that. What would you like us to focus on in the next 30 minutes?
Well, there's only 10 minutes left in the study hall.
What would you like us to focus on in the next 10 minutes?
I would like you to look at these questions and answers that I have on the screen and ask yourself
Okay.
if you know the answer. And if you don't know the answer, try to
Okay.
figure out the answer.
Okay, great. Would you be sharing that? Would you be able to make that larger? Thank you. That's much better.
Sorry. I can't. Sorry, I'm going to come back to this in a second. My computer is messing me up.
Okay, I may be able to share it on the screen on our end, but
That seems good.
so,
Thank you.
questions, answers. Is that legible?
Yes, it can even be a little smaller than that. Thanks so much. That's looking good.
Okay, what is the cutting cloth? What are the allowable ropes and materials?
And how is this document shared?
It's Google Docs.
I have to depart from this meeting for a second.
Sure, it's actually shared with everybody. Okay, it might have been shared just maybe not with all of us. Let me share. Okay, so open up.
And the way to make a document available offline is
This has been
I
shared with people, but let me
just found it and got into it.
okay.
And it hadn't loaded in before, but it's loaded now. I mean, there was a whole queue of emails that hadn't downloaded. Can I make this available for myself to view offline? How do I do that so that I'm not taking up?
So if you go to File, Available Offline, that should make it available to you offline.
I'm not seeing that as a live option. It's a light gray.
Let's see.
Anyhow, never mind. I've got this part of the questions. Second page, they're kind of in the middle. So, questions. Was this document shared with Ayaprabhu? I see that it looks like Tamadrini Monastery, you, Ayasachita, Ayasobana, and that's who I see. Oh,
Something. Here. Let's see. Now is sharing something.
yeah.
And it's 1:30.
Mhm.
Shall we come back from study hall and see what we've learned? Oh, yes, Ayasopana, you're muted.
Greetings again, IA, and I just want to formally invite you and welcome you to offer this instruction portion for our Vinaya Studies Intensive today, focusing on Katina. Welcome, IA.
Thank you, Aya. The first question was about the robe and how it comes to be allowable. And I clicked down, following the hint that I planted, to see in the Parivara that the Katina cloth can be an outer robe, the upper robe, or what's called here the sarong, or the lower robe, the inner robe. Either one of those three. And it can be made of any of these.
For clarity, with regards to the Pali names of these robes.
Yes, I started putting the Pali letter, but well, who can give the Pali names?
Yes, one of our colleagues. That's really good, right?
Just to be clear that everyone knows what this is referring to.
I'm sorry, I'm waiting to hear the Pali names.
Who would like to answer? What are the Pali names next to the bookmark on the screen?
Yes, we're seeing if anyone here knows the Pali names. Test.
Venerable Anuvedita would like to try. Please go ahead. Okay, the outer robe would be Sangati, okay. Upper robe would be Uttara Sanko, and the sarong would be Does anyone disagree? Does anyone think differently, or do you agree? Agree or disagree about what's intended here? Okay, we have two thumbs up at least, one of them from Venerable Anuvedita. And any disagreements? No, so various names may be given, but that's what the Pali is, to be clear.
Then regarding this first question about how this cloth, the criteria for cloth which is allowable, there's a second hint that I gave, which is coming from Khandaka 7. And it says here, the cloth is brand new, it's nearly new, it's old, it's a rag. So it can be any of those things and still be allowable. This is in the Khandaka about the Katina. It's from a shop. It has been done if a monk hasn't given a sign, hasn't given a hint. That means that the monk has not been improperly asking for the robe or asking for a particular kind of robe. If the robe hasn't been borrowed and it hasn't been stored, that means if you had a stored up cloth in the robe store or in your possession that was not given within the Katina time, and then you just pull it out of the closet and say, this can be our Katina cloth, that would not be allowed. That's disallowed from this language. If it's not to be relinquished, and then there's
However, I'd just like to mention here that
yes, I would come to it about this cloth offered in
the Vinaya masters say that with Vidya Pachitya for the beast number 28, that the cloths offered in urgency, the Cheka Chivara, can then be stored and contributed to, if it's offered within 10 days in urgency, that it can then be stored and can be then distributed to the community after the Katina has been offered. I'm just adding that in. This is what one of the Vinaya masters has said.
that comes in one of the, that comes in the next point, bullet point on my outline.
In that case, the virgin could be stored.
Right.
Can we go offline?
I did.
Yes, I think, okay, sorry, I see no numerous
I
devices.
were just asking everyone now to come offline more clearly.
Okay. Go ahead, Aye.
Yes. So that was the qualification about the cloth.
Somehow your screen has jumped.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to make out what you're saying, and
Our share screen has disappeared here. We're not seeing it anymore.
right, I'm not sharing with you at the moment.
Okay.
You know, it's very difficult to share the screen while I'm like jumping up and down in this through this 80-page document. So it's a little bit. I'm trying not to make people get nauseated and need to throw up from looking at the screen as it flies up and down. That was the qualifications about the cloth, and then there was another section that I wanted to point to about what steps have to be taken in making up the cloth. This is defining the activity that we will need to do on the Kachina day. And now I shall share the screen again and show you that this is also from the Khandaka. Here it's referring to, this is the procedure. First, there is the Sangha should give the cloth through a legal procedure consisting of one motion and one announcement to a monk who is performing the robe-making procedure. And we may have time to review, or you may just read the script of that legal procedure. And then the one who's called the monk performing the robe-making procedure in this translation, they have to wash the cloth, iron it, plan it, cut it, sew it, dye it, mark it. And then do the robe-making procedure. That's called Kachina procedure. And then if he wants to do this with the outer robe, he relinquishes his old outer robe and determines the new outer robe. While making this statement, I'm doing the robe-making procedure with this outer robe. And then likewise, whichever robe they're doing. Then, after having completed making the robe, they approach the Sangha and they do this other procedure called spreading the Kachina. Before I go there, I want to go back to this outline of the basic questions.
Planet means measure. And market means
And
bindu.
review about the allowance for the cloth given in urgency, which is part of the, I think it's the
Nisagya Pachitya. The Mahavibanga.
Bhikkhus Nisagya Pachitya 28, and then for the Bhikkhuni it's 29. But we do not have our own commentary in the Vibhanga. We have to rely on the Bhikkhu's Vibhanga. So the take home is here. When there are 10 days left to the Kartika full moon that ends the first rainy season residence, and haste cloth is given to a monk, he may receive it if he regards it as urgent. He may then store it until the end of the robe season. In the definitions, they explain about given in urgency, and it includes these cases. Someone wants to go out with an army, someone wants to go away when someone is sick, when someone without faith acquires faith. These are things that can happen to a donor. That means the donor needs to give the cloth in urgency, and they can do it not on the Kachina, but up to 10 days before the end of the first Kachina retreat. Also, the definition here is given about the robe season. This is the time after, this is the time that the monk is allowed to keep unsewn up robe cloth, and during this entire robe season, they can sew up the cloth into robes. And there's several other privileges that happen during the robe season. If somebody doesn't participate in what's called robe making procedure, which is the Kachina, if they didn't participate in Kachina, then the last month of the rainy season is their robe season. And then if they did participate in the Kachina, then it's a 5-month period, which is that last month of the Vasa, that last month of the rainy season, and then the entire next season, which is 4 months. It might be useful to eliminate confusion to briefly glance at the seasons, which people may or may not quite have in mind. So there are 4 seasons of the year: Gimha, the hot season; Vasa, the wet season; and Hemanta, the cool season. Then the hot season, starting with Chitta, March, April; Chitta, Vesaka, Jeta, and Asalha. Those are also the names, the Pali name of the Uposatha days. Then the rainy season, the Vasa, Savana, Potapada, Asayuja, Katika. If a person is taking first Vasa, then they're on the retreat for the first 3 months of the Vasa season. So this is the period of their Vasa retreat. And then the 4th month is the traditional Kachina season. Then if they're taking the second Vasa, they're taking these following 3 months as their retreat. And during the Kachina season, they will not yet have completed their retreat. And then following, if somebody does participate in the Kachina and they get what's called this 5-month robe season, then that's covering this last month of the Vasa season and the 4 months of the cool season, of the Hemanta season. So then they have all the way up through March, potentially, as their robe season, unless some other factors don't come up, which causes the end of their robe season. I just wanted to mention that because in the commentary, when it's mentioning the last month of Vasa, they're talking about not the last month of the first Vasa retreat, but the last month of the Vasa season. So I feel that's important to just go back to just review the, like, sort of the basic story of what the Katina is and why we have it, what it's for, so that everybody has this fixed in their mind. There were monks who've completed their rainy season residence. The Buddha said, I allow monks who have completed the rainy season residence to do a robe-making procedure. That says, it's called, that's the translation that Ajahn Brahmali is using for Katina. Once you have participated in the robe-making procedure, 5 things are allowed: visiting families before or after a meal invitation, staying apart from your robe for more than a day, eating in a group, keeping as much extra robe cloth as you need, and whatever robe cloth is given, that's at the Katina, is only for those who have participated in the robe-making procedure. I want to see if there are questions or about the Katina privileges, or if that's understood.
It looks like we have questions here. Venerable Bhikkhuni Anuridhita has Palms and Anjali with a question.
To me, it's like
I would say, hearing no questions, I'll go on, except I think their screen might be frozen.
Vinaya. Oh, we have a question, IA.
Sorry. I'm sorry, can you speak again? I have trouble on my side.
Do they have spend Vasa together for making a Katina, or can they just make their Vasa anywhere and meet for a Katina?
Great question.
Did you hear that, IA? Okay, I'm typing it in the chat.
I can hear noise, but it's very muffled
in the chat.
and very difficult to understand.
Shall we take the headphone and pass that? I mean, pass it around? That seems like that worked before to get it clear. We can get that. Yeah, thank you. Try to use the headphone now. See if that will help. Headphone mic. On top of the black box, and when the light comes on, then you should be able to speak into the mic that's on there once we get it converted over on the computer. But hold that part close to.
Okay.
Do you hear us better now?
Oh, that's much better. Thank you.
Perfect. Wonderful. But I think Venerable Anna already got the question in the chat. Yes? Okay. My question was if monks or nuns
In order to get the
spend
katina,
it spend it together.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So there are two questions. One question is about who's able to be one of the monks making up the quorum for the Sangha Kama. And the other question is about
Right.
what monks are participating in the katina and getting the katina privilege. To my understanding, in order to get the katina privilege, you have to stay together for the entire vasa and participate in the
Okay.
katina ceremony. Ayati, you may correct me if I'm wrong about that, because now,
Thank you,
as we've
Ayi.
said, that the katina is here at the monastery, and there's not a katina ceremony happening at the hermitage. Does that mean
I
that
was
all
looking
the
to correct you or to
hermitage?
clarify that
Yeah.
in the. I just wanted to clarify that in the Thai traditions, in my experience, generally they understand that there needs to be at least 5 bhikkhus or 5 bhikkhunis who have observed the vasa together in one place in order to be able to hold the katina. In order to be able to have the katina sangakama. And also I'd like to acknowledge that other traditions, other Theravada traditions do not understand it in that way. The understanding of, for example, most of the Sri Lankan Theravada traditions is that there needs to be at least one monastic who has one bhikkhu or one bhikkhuni who has at that residence. And then if a Sangha gathers together, then when the Sangha is gathered and the cloth is offered, that then the Sangha can legitimately, that gathered Sangha can legitimately then do the Sangha Kama in order to bestow that Katina cloth only on the one who has purely and unbrokenly observed the Vasa in that place, at that place. So that means even if there's only one, and in the canon, when we review this, in the canonical text, we do see the example of there being only one monk who has observed the Vasa in one place, and then other monks being willing to gather together, then for the Katina robe to be able to be offered and the Katina Sangha Karma, and then the of the Katina. The one who has observed the Katina purely and unbrokenly in that place, whether they're a bhikkhu or whether they're a bhikkhuni, is the only one who is eligible for the Sangha to bestow the Katina robe upon and to spread the Katina. So if there were then 2 bhikkhus or 2 bhikkhunis who observed the Vasa in one place, and then there were 3 others, whether bhikkhus or bhikkhunis, and I just want to comment here that for Sangha Kama, if you have 2 bhikkhus and 3 bhikkhunis, or if you have 2 bhikkhunis and 3 bhikkhus, the bhikkhus cannot complete the quorum for a bhikkhuni Sangha Kama, and the bhikkhunis cannot complete the quorum for a bhikkhu Sangha Kama. So it has to be a quorum of bhikkhus, specifically with regards to the Katina.
My understanding
Yes,
is that the Korwat of Dhammadharini is that even if there are less than 5 bhikkhunis together for the entire Vasa, that other bhikkhunis can be invited and make up the quorum for the Sangha Kama. We know that the bhikkhuni who is to receive the Katina cloth is going to be one who is both dwelling at that residence where the Katina happens and also meets the other qualifications. And that person obviously receives the Katina privileges. I believe the question is about who else is eligible to receive Katina privileges. And it is my understanding that definitely all those who lived together throughout the Vasa and were part of the Katina ceremony, part of the spreading the Katina. Spreading the Katina is after the cloth is all made, and the bhikkhuni who's carrying out the Sangha procedure, making the robe and so forth, then as an individual, not as a Sangha karma, she then approaches either the Sangha or a group of bhikkhunis or an individual bhikkhuni, whoever is there, and says to them that the Katina is spread, and they acknowledge that and rejoice in that. And it was my understanding that those other bhikkhunis would have the Katina privileges. It's not just the one bhikkhuni who's appointed to receive the cloth, but it's all of them who have observed the Vasa together and participated in the Katina, have those privileges.
Thank you, Ai. So you brought up several different topics together, and I think we moved from one topic into another very closely related topic. And so I just want to acknowledge at the beginning for Dhammadharini, for myself, having been largely instructed about Katina from Thai traditions, then we didn't have Katina in the beginning when there was one bhikkhuni or two bhikkhunis or even three bhikkhunis who had purely and completely observed the Vasa, because we thought there needed to be at least 5 who had observed the Vasa together. However, at one point, this issue is brought up for discussion, and we reviewed the canon and we reviewed different teachers' comments about this, including Ajahn Tanisro's updated commentary in Buddhist Anthropic. And then we decided to change our Korwat in this regard, that is to allow what appeared to be properly canonical, even though it was different than the Thai traditions. And so we then updated our Korwat at the initiative of our resident bhikkhunis, by the decision of our resident bhikkhunis together, to allow for the Katina to be offered, not only papa or forest cloth, but actual Katina to be offered when there was at least one bhikkhuni in residence, if a bhikkhuni sangha could be gathered. And with 2 locations, of course, and also then bhikkhunis being able to gather together for this. So then the next, as well as from other locations like Ala, or sometimes bhikkhunis have even joined us from across the country, from another state, or from Southern California and other locations too. Sometimes not even for completing the quorum. We might have already had a quorum, but we just wanted to invite them to join in and enjoy the Katina together for Sangha harmony, and as a beautiful thing to do together. And sometimes also because the donors of the Katina wish to invite more monastics, more bhikkhunis to join in together. Even this year also, then our Katina, those who have pledged the Katina, who we're calling our leading Katina donors, that is Mala Vijay Kun and Chanaka Ekanayaka, then they wished, particularly Chanaka asked, what about, can we invite more bhikkhunis to join in together? And so we checked with them, and then it had seemed like it was, conditions were favorable. Also, when we talked about it, they had hoped for those who are the new bhikkhunis that we might be able to have the Katina before those bhikkhunis would be needing to depart due to the end of their ESTA visa waiver. And that includes then Venerable Bhikkhuni Anuvisha.
To the subsequent topic.
Okay, please go ahead and bring us back on topic.
The question was asked about the Katina privileges. That's why I was trying to circle back to that aspect of it.
Actually, when I heard the question, it didn't seem to me about Katina privileges. My understanding of the question was that it was about the topic that all the monastics who participated in the Katina together needed to have observed the Vasa purely together in one place. So that's why I was talking about that topic, is because that's what I had heard and understood the question to be. And I know that the sound quality was not good, so it might not have come through clearly. But that's why I was talking about that topic. And that's why I'm sorry, I didn't realize what you had heard, That's why I thought you had branched into another topic. And that was just because I didn't know what you had heard.
I was responding to the question as it was typed up in the chat.
What's that,
I was responding to the question as it was typed up in the chat. And it referred to those monks who make the Katina.
I couldn't see what was typed in the chat. So did you type in the chat about Katina privileges?
It was about making the Katina. What does it mean to make the Katina? To make the Katina includes the Sangakama, it includes making up the robe, and it includes...
And then was not really well matching with what the question was, because it wasn't, I'm sorry, I'm talking at the same time as you, but it's because Venerable Kachayana didn't understand the question, so it wasn't communicated clearly in the chat. So sorry about that. Would you be willing to take a question from Bhante Jayasara?
So the topic I was on in my outline was the privileges. Is there a question about that?
Bhante Jayasara does have a question about the Katina privileges.
Okay.
And are you saying that you only want questions that are like specifically directed to the point that you're at in your outline?
That's what I was trying for.
Not other questions that may seem the person who's asking, or what's that? Hold on. Bhante Jayasara believes he has a question that's on topic for your outline.
Yes, in relation to what you were talking about, who gets the Katina privileges, in my reading of at least the Kandakas, what I understood in terms of the privileges, what I always saw was a Katina was one person gets the robe, but in terms of what I see in the Kandakas, it seems basically it could be more than one monastic, right? Is this something that I'm misreading, or is it just any order that goes through Katina together? Only one person gets one robe, as opposed to multiple people, multiple robes, multiple monastics with the privileges. So I'm just
Yes, thank you. My understanding is
an order of clarification is, or I didn't see something or not.
what I was trying to say is that the privileges are not only for one person. The privileges are for all of the monks who have fully observed the Vasa and participated in the Katina. And the participation in the Katina, which is done by all, is the Sangakama, that's the action and the motion and the acceptance of the motion. And then also it's the spreading the Katina, which happens at the end of the making up of the robe.
Thank you. I'd like to try to respond to this question in a bit of a different way. So when someone offers Katina cloth that's meant to be for the Katina, then they can offer the minimum amount of the cloth would be, when we look at those three robes, whether the Sangati, Uttara Sangha, or Antaravasika, the minimum amount of cloth needed would be to make a lower robe which was called a sarong on our text that we were looking at, and called the Antaravasika or Antaravasaka. Antaravasako is another way of saying in the Pali. So the minimum amount of cloth that would need to be offered in order to spread the katina would be enough to make a lower robe, which has a minimum of 5 rows or 5 panels in it. So that would be the minimum, but often people offer more than that. And sometimes they offer even heaps and heaps more than that. With regards to the spreading of the katina, however, that's just one robe that gets made then by the monastic who the Sangha bestows the cloth upon. But there may be lots of cloth extra, and sometimes they will offer also, normally even, they will offer not only cloth, but they'll offer thread and sometimes scissors, and sometimes they'll offer a sewing machine. And sometimes also they'll offer robes that are already made up, or other shirts and socks and woolen hats and mittens and various things like that that might even be all like heaped up together, or they might be offered as part of a sanghadana that comes after the katina robe has been offered, which might include even more cloth from other cloths from various people, robes that are already made, woolen hats, gloves, thread, scissors, toothpaste, toothbrushes, laundry detergent. All these various kinds of things can then be added in for the sankatana that might then come after the sharing of the katina cloth. But what if the people give a lot of cloth? And then what happens? And only the Sangha only, suppose the Sangha only decides to make an upper robe or Uttara Sangha. And then there's lots of cloth. Then what's supposed to happen with that cloth? And I think this might speak to Bante's question, because as I said, only one member of the Sangha can be the recipient of the Sangha's designation of the cloth, only one. However,
if we can come back to the outline of what's already been
that
presented,
katina robe is made, a whole lot of other cloth or other robes and other cloths that were given, then those can be distributed. Those should be distributed out to the participating Sangha members, those members of the Sangha who have participated in the katina together. And that's an important part of this, that is then the fair distribution of whatever additional katina cloth or katina robes were offered. Ayasopana?
Yes, I
can't see you anymore. Oh, there you are again. It's suddenly like you disappeared, and then like magic, it's like you reappeared on the screen here again.
I didn't know if you wanted me to offer this class or not, Aye, but you're going over things.
So does that agree with your understanding? I hope that speaks to what you're asking.
You're going over
What's that?
information at great length, which is either elsewhere in the outline I have or has already been mentioned, that is under the Katina privilege, is that the cloth which is offered is divided among those monks who participated in the Katina. That is one of the 5 Katina privileges, is receiving a share of that, what is given as part of the Katina offering. It doesn't...
Right. Thank you for summarizing that.
Somebody who has not participated in the Katina is not eligible to receive the share of the Katina offering.
Right. So someone might ask, what if everyone receives what they feel like they need, and then there's more? And can they give that, if there are robes given, can they give that back to the store? Can they give that back to the Sangha? What if you visit If you participate in a katina with another community and then they give you robes, but you don't need robes, do you have to take them, or can you give them back to the sangha there? If you do take them, can you give them to the store in your own monastic community, or do you have to keep them yourself?
This is a very good question because traditionally one is only allowed to have the 3 robes or the 5 robes for the bhikkhuni. And then if you're given, like if you already have one upper robe and they give you another upper robe, you're not supposed to have 2 of them. We get around that by sometimes determining a second upper robe as a miscellaneous cloth. And then the robe which we're using as the upper robe is the one that's determined that way. And we could own other cloth it's an upper robe in the shape, the physical shape and form of it, but we've determined it as a miscellaneous cloth. A more
By the
alternative way
way,
of doing it.
miscellaneous cloths here is another way of saying what we were talking about earlier as parikara chola.
Thank you.
Parikara cholang, which I had been calling in English additional cloth requisites, and Ayasobana is calling miscellaneous cloth, which is another regular way of saying parikara cholang. Thank you, Aya. Please go ahead.
If they want to be more, or somebody who wants to be consistent and not on more than necessary as a personal, in their personal ownership, they can relinquish robes or robe cloths to the communal stores, or else they can put their robes into a shared ownership, either with the store, with the monastic store where they're staying, or they can put it into shared ownership with another individual monastic. And then there's a whole other procedure beyond the scope of this class about how to place a robe into shared ownership and how to bring it out of shared ownership.
Thank you for mentioning that, Aya. That's really good because we did go over that. We have gone over that, so that's a really timely and appropriate reminder for us with regards to what we've already learned. And I think of one other aspect, which is the extent of the robe season, which we covered briefly. And in what you shared, then the robe season was mentioned as, just the katina season, or
I want to go over the reasons why the robe season can end.
Which also, if someone is observing second vasa, then that would be the final month of their vasa. But if you've observed first vasa and you participated in the spreading of the katina, then what we read and what Ayasobana showed us was then there was up to 5 months, the last month of the rainy season or monsoon season, plus the 4 months of the cold season or hemanta, which could be then the robe season. And I just want to highlight here that the monastic community is allowed to continue the robe season for that long. And unless they stop it early, it automatically continues that long for those who observed the first vasa and participated in spreading the katina together. However, a monastic community can end that if they think it's appropriate to. They could end it after 2 weeks. They could agree to end it after 2 months. They don't have to let it run for that entire period of time. But as long as it runs, as Ayasobana said and showed us, then these privileges that are in effect, which means you can keep as much robe cloth as you want during that time. However, when that ends, then you can't anymore. Means if you didn't finish making up your katina robes, or you received extra robes during the katina time, then you should, unless you feel you need them. And as Ayasobana said, then there's the method of determining something like that is parikara cholang, if you feel it is needed and useful for you to determine it as an additional cloth requisite. But otherwise, by the time that the community determines that the robe making season is over and is there to end, which a community can itself do at will, then at that time, then you shouldn't be keeping whatever things that were offered without having, necessarily figured out what are you going to make. And determining all that, you might have whatever you've received during that time, but when that ends, then you should determine yourself what you need, and then properly determine that it's yours, and then you relinquish, you give up. Only that's to the community store, or as Ayasobana said, again, as we talked about earlier, to shared ownership is another possibility. If you think there's only two of you there and you think it may be useful for you, you don't have a community store to give it to or someone else to give it to. All these circumstances that
I'd like
we
to
reviewed.
I'd like to read off the language about how the robe season ends, especially as it applies to those bhikkhunis who are going to depart from this community. So I'm going to share that screen.
Thank you. That's really important.
So the robe season ends.
And also for Bhante, when he departs.
Yeah. So
please, I go ahead.
And I have on the shared screen, the robe season ends when he departs from the monastery, or when the robe is finished. I think that would mean for an individual, you can help me on this when we come to the end of this reading, when an individual has finished making up what robes they need to make up, they can then make this acknowledge, I finished making the robes, and then my robe season is finished. When he makes a decision, that's some monks who are very conscientious, they don't want all these privileges, they want to be strict all the time, and they decide not to have those privileges to make that season come to an end. When the robe cloth is lost, when he hears about the end of the robe making season, when an expectation of more robe cloth is thwarted, when he is outside the monastic boundary, when the robe making season comes to an end altogether, that meaning the maximum length of either the 1 month or the 5 months. And I want to just, it's a little bit abstruse understanding what really is meant here. There's another section, this is in the Parivara, about the kind of endings of the robe making season. Some of them are dependent on the Sangha. Some of them are depending on the individual. And some of them are not depending on either. So depending on the Sangha is when the robe making season comes to an end midway. That means the Sangha decides before the maximum length of time, the Sangha decides the robe season is over. That's what Ayatollah just said. Then there's 4 kinds of endings that are depending on an individual. When one departs from a monastery, when the robe is finished, when one makes a decision, and when one is outside a monastic boundary. Subsequently, there was a description where somebody took their robe cloth and went outside the boundary and thought, now I'm going to make my Katina robe. And in that case, their robe season is finished, so it's not proper. And then the kinds that are not depending on either the Sangha or the individual, the robe cloth comes to be lost. One hears about the end of the robe making season, I'm not sure what that refers to. The expectation of more robe cloth is thwarted. There was a case in our Pachitya rules where we received a certain amount of cloth, but it wasn't enough to make up a robe. And then they keep the cloth that's not quite enough with the expectation that they're going to receive more and be able to make it up into a full robe. But if additional cloth never comes. And then they're thwarted in the expectation of more robe cloth. And then finally, when the robe making season comes to an end together, that means the end of the 5 months, as far as I know. So there are these reasons for, you can see that this period of privileges is really being thought of mainly as a time that the community is really focused on making up the robes that they're going to be needing for the rest of the year. And if that robe making activity is finished, there's not any reason to continue with your robe season and want to have an extension of the privileges, of the other privileges of like being able to go out from the monastery without permission or something like that. So, Tia, I invite you to clarify the meaning of these other ways of ending the robe season, or if there are any questions about that.
Hi, let's check in and see about questions here. Let me just check back in with Bante Jayasara. Did that answer your question?
In terms of the form, it'll say on so and so robe. It's not clear to me that it is only one robe, only one. So I have to work it out in my read and.
Okay.
I'm not seeing, like, for me in my mind, I'm not seeing from what I see and then what I see in something missing.
I just like to clarify my understanding that only one Sangha member may be bestowed the Katina robe with the charge to spread the Katina by the Sangha that's gathered.
Yes.
More robes can't be made out of the cloth. If there's enough, they can be. It doesn't mean that more even made up robes can be offered at that time together. They can be, but still, it also doesn't mean that others can't help or participate together in the sewing, whether the measuring or the cutting or the sewing or the dyeing or the drying of the Katina robe. In fact, that's normally a Sangha activity to do so. It could be done just by one monk, but one monastic, I want to say, one bhikkhu or one bhikkhuni, but often it's a communal activity, and it's highly recommended that it be a community activity together. And this is one of the things I love about the Katina is, you know, even some people just put a few stitches from various, not only even the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, but also some and add a few stitches and add stitches and help cut. And also upasakas and upasikas, friends, neighbors can also do that, all of those things together. Still, finally, though, it's only that person who the Sangha bestowed the cloth on who is the one to spread the Katina, and then doesn't ask. It becomes theirs because they undetermine their old robe and they determine the new robe. That Katina robe is their robe.
What happens to the old robe, Aye?
I'll say there's a Sri Lankan tradition then that the one who is the recipient of that robe, who spreads the Katina for that Katina, and even if they don't like that robe, that they shouldn't change it out for another one, even if it was badly sewn. I know the first Katina robe that I received, then somehow it was polyester thread, and so the thread was like shining bright white. and everything in it. But it's a tradition. I actually don't see that specified in the Vinaya text, that it must be like that, but that is a strong, long Sri Lankan tradition that then you wear and you keep that robe with you for at least for 1 year afterwards. And that one with the white thread is still my sheet after so many years later. But I wore it as the robe, Uttara Sangha, upper robe, in the year after that. So I
have a
hope
question.
that might clarify further. I feel like that part's not helpful in Vinaya. The part that might, please,
The person who receives the robe is obliged to relinquish the corresponding robe that they had before. It was my understanding that they cannot keep that robe afterwards, that when it's relinquished, it's gone and that they cannot use that robe again. So if you think you might be the one to get the Katina robe, you might choose not to wear your very favorite robe on the Katina day, because whatever robe you're wearing when the Sangha Kama happens, you've got to relinquish it. And does that robe just then go into the store, or what happens to it after it's relinquished?
I think we're talking about a difference here between traditions, and you might be speaking in a way, you're speaking to what's there in the canon, which says you need to first, as we went over, first you need to undesignate your old robe. Suppose it was an Uttara Sangha, an upper robe. First you need to undesignate your upper robe, that is undetermined, which is? Quickly. Pachutarana, yes. So you need to undetermine, then you Uttara Sangham Pachutarami, 3 times like that. And then I don't really mean it for my upper robe right now. This is just an example. And then after that, then you would mark the new robe that's been completed. You would bindu it, you would mark it, and then you would determine. And when you determine the new upper robe, the new Uttara Sangha, then what's that called? Then you would say imang Uttara Sanghang aditami, or it might be your sangati, imang sangating aditami, or it might be your lower robe, your sarong, and you would say imang antarawasakang aditami, like that, yes. But then this is the part here where the canon does not say that you can never use that upper robe again, and that you have to give it away. But there is, as Sobana mentioned, there is a tradition as such, but I'm not really familiar with the tradition, so I can't tell you the details of the tradition. But in the canon, it doesn't say then what needs to happen to it at that time. And as Sobana was saying earlier, then different possibilities are there. You could put it into shared ownership with someone, or you could give it to the monastic store, or you could determine it as a parikara cholang, and then it would be your, what we often call work robe. As an old robe, you could determine it as your upper sheet. Like I have my old Katina robe from 11 years ago is determined as my sheet. So these various possibilities that Sobana was speaking about, I'm not familiar with, so I can't speak to the details of that tradition.
Thank you, Aye. It's 2:30 now. I would like to go ahead and review the procedure.
You're welcome.
For the comma.
Sure. And then shall we take then at 2:45, shall we take a 15-minute break and then gather together again for our second topic?
Yes, Aye.
At 3 p.m.?
Yes, Aye. I'm going to share the screen now for the Sangha Kama. Here's the procedure. A competent monk informs the Sangha And then this is the motion that they read. Please, Venerables, I ask the Sangha to listen. This cloth has been given to the Sangha for the robe-making procedure. If it seems appropriate, the Sangha should give this cloth to a monk so-and-so to do the robe-making procedure. The script that I'm reading, in one traditional format, several different bhikkhunis are reading lines, and then in the other procedure, which seems more compatible with the original text, it's just one competent bhikkhuni is reading this whole motion. So they give the motion. It should be given to monk so-and-so. And so they name the monk who they are nominating to receive this. Presumably that will have also been discussed among them beforehand.
And I'd like to say, I would like to request you to train 2 of our bhikkhunis here in this Sangha Karma.
Okay. And then this is repeated.
Would you be willing to do that, IA?
Yes, no problem. Except that they're not here, so I could train them 10 minutes beforehand, or I could think of another way of training them. We'll see how that happens. I'm only joking about 10 minutes beforehand. We'll find enough time for them to hear the motion and learn it. So they explain the motion, then they state the motion. This is the traditional format, to give the cloth to monk so-and-so, and then any monk who does not approve should speak up. If the Sangha approves, it remains silent, and then they say, Kamati Sangasa Tasmatunhi Eva Metang Dharayami Iti, and that will be the motion and the approval of the motion to give the cloth to that individual monk. Then that monk receives the cloth, and there's a long thing here that it's not just sewing one seam, not merely marking with a strip of cloth, not merely adding one border, not merely any one of these things is what they have to do. Instead, they have to do this entire procedure here. They have to sew the cloth into this measure, mark, cut. We went over this before, and sew the cloth. And then I want to just go ahead to the procedure for the procedure for spreading the katina, which is the thing that's the conclusion. Now, this procedure here was a Sangha Kama that requires a Sangha of 4 in addition to the one who's receiving the cloth. And then the second part of the katina procedure is called spreading the katina. And I'm going to open that up. So whichever cloth he's done, he's relinquished his old robe, the corresponding robe, and then making a statement in Pali about this. I do the robe making procedure with this robe, whatever upper robe, lower robe, or whatever kind it is. Then they would either approach the Sangha, or they would approach several monks, or they would approach a single monk. It can be any of the 3. And they put the new robe over one shoulder, raise the joined palms and say, the Sangha's robe-making procedure has been done. The robe-making procedure is legitimate. Please express your appreciation. And then the other monk, or the group of monks, or the individual, or the Sangha, express appreciation by joining their palms and saying, the Sangha's robe-making procedure has been done. The robe-making procedure is legitimate. I express my appreciation. So this procedure has to be done for the katina to be complete. Just receiving the cloth, just doing the Sangha karma, just sewing the cloth and making it up into a robe does not yet cause a complete katina. It's this final act of spreading the katina. Now, as I understand, this is happening anytime before dawn. So you can all be gathered together in the one place in the sema or the hall for that, or else you can go around to wherever the monastics are sleeping. The one who has the cloth, the finished cloth, could go around one by one to all the kutis and notify each one, and they could give their appreciation individually, or they could all be gathered together as a group, or they could all be gathered together as a sangha. That any of those ways of doing it is valid, and I think there's even a way of doing it from a distance. So if one of the monks has COVID, they can still express their appreciation. Now, we have a few minutes left before 3 o'clock, before 2:45. Well, we have 5 minutes left. I'm wondering, Aya, if you would like to clarify this, or if there are any questions about this part.
Some questions? Would you be willing to take some?
I'm going to put the earphones back because of the noise. The gardeners have come. The gardeners are gardening, and the builders are building. The foundation is being established for the Dhanasala.
Anumodhana.
They are making it straight, they're making it level, they're making it upright, and they're making it to the right measure so that when the kit comes along, it will fit and the sala will be upright and even.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Blessings and best wishes to them. Job well. Are you able to hear me now,
Yes, I am.
Okay. So during the time that our connection had gone out, then I was explaining to those here that this year our Katina donors hope to offer the Katina at Damadrini Monastery, and thus only the bhikkhunis who observe the Vasa at Damadrini Monastery would be eligible to be the Sangha Kama recipients of the Katina robe, even though all our bhikkhunis here would like to go and join in together and support the Sangha Kama together and support the sewing or the measuring, the cutting, the sewing, if dying were called for, then all of that, and to join in expressing our appreciation. That is our anumodhana together. And I explained that likewise, when the katina has been offered here at Aranya Bodhi before, then if that were to happen, then the bhikkhunis at the monastery could also come here, and likewise, except for only a bhikkhuni who had completed the vasa at Aranya Bodhi would be able to receive the katina here, if that were the case. So then I was considering then, as Ayasobana is often are serving as our kama vacha charini, which means one who recites the act for the Sangha. However, if the Sangha wishes to bestow the robe on someone who is normally the kama vacha charini, then you need to have different kama vacha charinis, because you're not supposed to bestow the robe upon yourself as Kamavacha Charini. Sangha bestows, the Kamavacha Charini acts on behalf of the Sangha to bestow the robe then upon the Sangha recipient. So I was explaining to the bhikkhunis and those who are here, then that if they're with us at the time of the Katina, and able to serve as part of the Sangha together, then it might be good for us to have one or two more trained Kamawacha charinis amongst our bhikkhunis here. And so that because we know that one of the bhikkhunis who's at the monastery would be the one who would be eligible for receiving the katina. So she would not be the Kamavacha charini in that case. So would you be willing to train the bhikkhunis who are here to be Kamavacha charini? Or at least an assisting Kamawacha Charini for this. Often there's a senior Kamawacha Charini and then there's an assisting Kamawacha Charini, two of them together. And would you be willing to train those who are here at least to be able to serve as an assisting Kamawacha Charini? For this Katina Sangakama that we just reviewed? Not today, but I'm just asking because you've served in this role, so I think you would be a suitable teacher for them in their serving as Kama. Yes, please, Sai.
I thought you asked me this question 15 minutes ago, and I thought I agreed to do so.
Oh, I didn't know because our connection dropped out, so I didn't realize that you could hear me and I couldn't hear your reply. So sadhu ai. Thanks so much.
It seems to me that if Ayatataloka, if you want to be presiding and not serving as a Kamavacha Charini, would that be the case, or would you be the senior Kamavacha Charini?
I would be delighted if one of the bhikkhunis at the monastery would serve as the senior Kamawacha Charini, and if any of our junior bhikkhunis who are here would be willing to be trained so that they might serve as the second junior Kamawacha Charini, that they would be ready to do that as needed.
Okay.
Is that all right with you, Would you, does that seem suitable?
Yes, I'll look into it. I think that Venerable Kachina is known to have good Pali pronunciation and to be quick in learning.
Yes.
So they may be one person for that.
That could be one. I would like others, though, if possible, I would like others to have the training to be able to assist in case they might go somewhere without Venerable Kachayana at some. So just to be ready to serve together with another senior or more senior bhikkhuni, and also eventually to be able to lead up in being a Kamavacha Charini themselves.
Okay.
Shall we take our break now, and then come back at 3 o'clock?
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ai, for your instruction during this time. And when we come back, then I have a special topic that I'll be initiating when we return.
What is that topic, Aye? Other, is it besides? Okay. Are you willing to be the Kamabhachacharini for this? It's just one motion, it's only 4 sentences. You know, together, recited together with Navaskachayana during the Sangha-kama. Thank you.
Count as a measure of merit, where I see even the other person, whoever is doing it on the sponsor's behalf, yeah, that person also makes huge merit, no harm. Yeah, but it would have to be given to the Sangha on the same day, to really understand. Yeah, that's all that comes to mind for now. Come across another message. I will keep my eyes and ears open. Okay. Thank you, also. Good evening. And as a period, last weeks, it's 25. Okay.
So, were you able to hear that?
Yes, I.
Just received this. I had some. Are you using your headphones and mic again? There's some strong background noise there.
The person is cleaning up the yard with the blower. I could have to mute myself, but then.
Okay, thanks. No worries. So now we're back together again, and now is the time for our special review and study and discussion on this topic. So first, did you mute yourself?
No, I did not mute myself.
What? Oh, okay, thanks, so let me see where I want to begin with this. There are some people who say the guru, the teacher, is the Buddha and should be treated like the Buddha. There are some people who say the Ajahn word is law, the teacher is right. And in terms of studied so far, when we're reviewing on with the mutual,
It looks like they lost their signal momentarily.
Go ahead, Aye. We're back.
The sound coming through now?
No, it shouldn't be because this isn't plugged in yet. Hang on.
sound check. Yes? Okay, 4 thumbs up. All right. So I'm not sure what you heard when we dropped off. But I was speaking about what we studied earlier with regards to Nisaya and the duties or responsibilities or interrelationship between the teacher and student that we find in the early Buddhist teachings expressed in the Pali Canon in the Vinaya Pitaka. If the student develops a wrong view, then the teacher is supposed to help them or get someone else to help them. Or then also, likewise, if the teacher develops a wrong view, then the student is supposed to try to help them or get someone else to help them. And so these interesting things are there. What's meant by wrong view in this case. But I just want to highlight the nature of these teachings and practices in the early Buddhist teachings, and also to recognize there certainly are the contemporary places where the abbot, the ajahn, or people will tell you the ajahn's word is law. They are like a king in their own domain, and you this kind of thing. And there is that. For the teachings during this Vasa, I've tried to myself really place emphasis collaborative learning, not only on lecture and the teacher's role just being, as it sometimes is considered to be, the teacher's role or the guru's role to just tell others what to think and what to believe and what to do. Yes. And when we look at the role of the Buddha as expressed in the canon, in the Vinaya Pitaka, then we do see the Buddha in this role of what's sometimes translated as lawgiver, giver of the Dhamma, or giver of the Vinaya. In this case, law is a valid translation of Dhamma, and Dhamma is used in the Indian context for laws or for rules, and then Vinaya is actually normally used more for discipline or for restraint or for the Buddha spoke about himself as giving Dhamma and Vinaya. So earlier on in this Vasa, at the beginning of the Vasa, considering our circumstances, I had thought about what I had learned in Vinaya with regards to things that could be done early in urgency at the end of the Vasa. Particularly, I was thinking within the last 6 days of the Vasa that if someone needs to leave early, the allowance for leaving or offering one's pavarana up to 6 days early, and then also being able to depart up to 6 days early, then without it being considered breaking one's vasa. It's considered then one is in case of urgency able to legitimately in that way. And according to the section on robes or robe chapter, robe section, robe subchapter in the Nisagya Pachityas, and Ayasobana earlier today went over with us the Nisagya Pachitya. That's, what's that in English? That section? To be confessed and forfeited, exactly, or confession with forfeiture. So there's a section in there with a precept that begins, the precept itself, its name is Katina. And then the precepts that come after that are all precepts about robes and giving of robes. And when we look at the Parivara for this section also, and Parivara is the 5th collection in our Vinaya Pitaka. Then also there's a section Samutana, and then all of those precepts come underneath that section, that category. So I had in my mind from reciting the Patimokkha many times and from studying the Vibhanga, not only that allowance for potentially leaving up to 6 days early in case of urgency, and having offered one's pavarana up to 6 days or 7 days, it may say, early in case of urgency. But also I had in my mind this Nisagya Pachitya precept, which is, as Ayasobana said earlier and showed us earlier, number 28 for the bhikkhus and number 29 for the bhikkhunis. And it's a shared precept. What are shared precepts called in Pali? Sadharana, exactly. So now our Anagarika Siddhinanda has 3 stars for today. And also, Venerable Bhikkhuni Anuvedita has 3 stars. So the next one to answer needs to be someone else. So it's a Sadharana precept, and you're all welcome to take a look at that. And even Ayasobana would be, if she'd like to share screen and show that to us on the screen again, then she'd be welcome to do that. So I had this in my mind. Then this precept says that in case of urgency, then a donor may offer the robe up to 10 days early before the Kartika full moon. And the Kartika full moon, when does that happen in a year? Now we studied the cycle of the years and the seasons. When is the Kartika full moon? At the end of the Vasa, and it's at the end of the Patama Vasa, which we saw. So if one has entered second Vasa, then the Kartika full moon is the moon that begins the final month of the second Vasa. So that's the moon. Now recently we had our new moon Uposatha. And that means then we're coming up on, we're in the brightening fortnight, which is when the light gets brighter and brighter, and then the new moon is moving towards the full moon. And that's the Kartika full moon that's coming up now in less than 2 weeks' time. So it says when there are 10 days left to the Kartika full moon that ends the first rainy season residence, that's the Patamavasa Vasa, and the haste cloth. In haste here also is translated as in urgency. And urgency is the word that's used for this is generally acheka. And so this may be able to be highlighted here. Acheka chivara, which means chivara, robe or robe cloth. And the same word is used for robe cloth and for a robe that's sewn, unless a specific name is given to that robe. Like you could say your chivara, your sankati chivara, your uttara sankati chivara, your antaravasika chivara. These are all chivara. And then also the cloth. We learned another word for cloth, of course, and that's chola, which really just means cloth. But chivara is cloth for robe or a robe itself. And acheka means in urgency. It can be used for an emergency, or it can be used in haste, as we have translated here. Called haste or urgency, acheka. So I had this in mind when at the beginning of the Vasa, and I also had these other precepts, these other provisions in Vinaya in mind when I proposed early on in the Vasa, that for the sake of our donors' wish to be able to offer to all of the bhikkhunis who have gathered together, and especially the newly ordained bhikkhunis, we had been thinking at that time of both Ajahn Brahmawara and of then seminary, now bhikkhuni Anuvedita, needing to leave like just right at the end of the Vasa, directly after the Pavarana, because of their ESTA visa waiver ending. And so I had proposed the idea about us having our katina, if the donors wanted to be able to include them in the donation of donors. And then also I had considered, really, I've been thinking a lot about your training and wanting you to be able to learn not only in theory, but also in practice, and thinking about, when will you have a chance for Katina at Anincha Vihara, or when will you have a chance for Katina at Siddhi Sampano Cloister, or in UK first, or Bhikkhuni Sangha Katina has maybe already happened or not yet. So I was thinking about the chance to be able to have both study and practicum together compassionately. And it seemed to me that there was a pattern here in the Vinaya. But of course, all of these are exceptional circumstances. So also, I want to come back to this, the meaning of Sangha Kammas with regards to the ordination, and the question of whether the Sangha Kamma isn't like just putting icing on the cake, but basically you've already made the cake, or just like kind of like a ritual to affirm something that everyone has already agreed to. But really, essentially, the agreement, the free will agreement of every single participating member of the Sangha is essential to Sangha Kammas. And when we look at the teaching on Sangha Kammas themselves, then if a person is in doubt about something, even we find precepts. You can see in the Patimokkha, if you participate in a Sangha Kamma and then afterwards you say, I was doubtful, I didn't know what was going on, I really didn't agree, then that's a fault for you. So the reverse side of that is each Sangha member has their own rights and abilities to find out about the things involved in Sangha Kammas, to ask any questions that they need to ask, to clear up their doubts, and to do so timely. What is timely is not prescribed in the Vinaya, other than they must do it before participating in the Sangha Kamma together. But when we think about practicalities, or during the Sangha Kamma, you can say, I disagree, I don't agree. At that time, the time when they're repeating over and then they're saying, before they say, because the Sangha is silent, it has agreed, thus shall I remember it. Before they say that is the time that you're supposed to express your doubt, or if you have a disagreement, your disagreement. Yes? And also, we compassionately understand, we know for things like ordinations, like how hard did we work for preparing that beforehand, right? So we want to try to go over the things beforehand. And if there are any doubts, any questions, any disagreements, to clear those up beforehand. And in fact, one of our Sangha members from afar, when hearing about our plan for the ordination by messenger, then because it wasn't really familiar to them, I had discussed with our close Sangha members in advance, because I really wanted to find out whether they thought it was applicable. And even Sangha members from far away, I discussed in advance beforehand, to find out whether they thought that this could be workable. Even originally, it wasn't my idea. Somebody else, another bhikkhuni in a different country, checked with me to see whether I thought this was applicable to our COVID situation or not, which is what put it in my mind. So I did all that, but I didn't check with everyone, right? And so then there was someone, a senior, and then was suddenly like, concerned about that. And what are we doing? And is it appropriate or not? And so then at the very last minute, then even like staying up late until the night, then I was trying to give the full rundown and explanation about that, even though she wasn't present together with us, but just because I really honor and appreciate the process. And I know for myself, even with more than 30, nearly 35 years in monastic life, and then now how many vasas as a bhikkhuni, I don't remember. Someone has to remind me about that. But I received the full bhikkhuni ordination in 1997. So you can help me remember how many vasas this is. So quite a few, and I'm still learning. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the opportunities like this, and about using the collaborative learning and discussion process, questions that are brought up that sometimes I never thought of it. Sometimes I never looked at it like that until somebody else asked that question. Then I pointed my mind to that. Then I could see the point or the question and appreciate that and the importance of it. Even Vinaya can seem so multifaceted and detailed, but when we understand the nature of a whole community's thoughts and ideas and questions about something, it's trying to gather all of that together. So you might think, I have only one of these questions, or I don't have any of these questions myself. But if you think about everybody and all their thoughts and questions and ideas, then you can see how all of these questions and all of these things may be there. So it's trying to serve community and individuals within community and individuals with different, say, different kinds of sense, characters, talents, capabilities, those who are good with numbers, those who are good with letters, told what to do and how to do it to be simple, those who want to learn and discuss and question everything, and so many different characters like this. So I had proposed this early on in the beginning of the Vasa, and then I mentioned it also then to various people during this time, including our board of directors and members of our monastic community who are longer time bhikkhunis, as well as those who are now the new bhikkhunis and Sangha members. Bhikkhu, Sangha member also, excuse me for saying Sangha member, I mean Ubato, Sangha member also heard about this. And yet then no one questioned me about that or expressed doubt about it or asked to look into it. But 2 days ago, then a senior Sangha member who was invited to offer our katina then realized that the date, about the date, and then the question came up, was it appropriate and proper or not? And so then that senior Sangha member then quickly raised that question, raised that doubt, and raised an objection to it. So I really appreciate that they did so. Also, I wish they would have done so long ago, but I recognize, that because they're not within our close circles, then they didn't recognize, they didn't realize the meaning of the dates. Even when announced earlier, it probably just didn't raise any flags at that time, but only at the time of the invitation to speak. So then after receiving that, I then shared my ideas standing why this could be allowable under our circumstances, but they did not think so. So in the previous case, when someone had an objection just before the ordination, and then I shared the whole train of reasoning with them, then they did withdraw their objection and their complaint, but in this case, not. So then yesterday, then I had a phone call with Aya Sobana to ask her about it, and I shared with her what they had shared with me, and she reviewed that. And then Aya Sobana felt that she agreed with their question or their objection, or at least she didn't want to, didn't want to disagree with it. Means not to take issue or say that's wrong, or that their objection has no basis, or that kind of thing. So then I set out to check in with some Vinaya masters as well as knowledgeable friends in Pali, because I went to look at the commentary then and see what does the commentary say. Then I was even looking at the sub commentary. For those who are interested to know, the commentary, the primary Pali text Vinaya commentary that I was looking at was the Samantapasadika. So I looked at that, and then I found in the very last sentence of the commentary, I found a phrase that I was actually I'm not so much familiar with some of the things that are often discussed. It's like really professional technical language that appears in some of the commentaries and sub-commentaries, and also in the Pariwara. I checked in the Pariwara and I looked in the commentary, and then I saw something about yesterday afternoon, a little bit after lunch, then I found something in the last sentence of the commentary. That could mean something here. But what does it mean? So then I started trying to check with the Pali expert, and the Pali expert was like, this is absolutely professional technical language. You have to know what this means in order to know what it means. So, right. I thought that was funny too. And that's what it looked like to me too. When I looked at the sub commentary, then I saw the same kinds of patterns of phrasing appearing over and over again in various ways. And then I realized this is something typical and standard that's not appearing in the canon in this way. It's not there are so many phrases in the canon that are repeated over and over again. Oh yes, sure. And just a moment, please. Okay, let me share that right here. I have it already on my screen here. So I have a problem with my switching back and forth between glasses, but I haven't fixed it. Okay, so if you go to tipitaka.org Roman, tipitaka.org Roman. I mean, I can just show this to you if you want, but if you want to, are you wanting to bring it up on the screen? I thought that was what you were requesting to do. No,
Put the link in the chat.
I was trying to answer. Okay. Anyway, the person. So you can. So go to then click on Vinaya Atakata. See it here to be your guide for how to get there. All these references, it would take a long time to review all of them. They would not be done by 4. And we're talking heavy duty Pali with no English translation. And yeah, number 4. You're under Parakanda. Yeah. Okay. Oh, under Parajika. Yeah. Okay. So we've got it coming up on your, hopefully is it shared screen or, okay. Is it possible to make big? Okay. And just search Acheka. Or you can go to the number that you see on there. There's a number on the side that you can use to guide you to scroll down. This is on tipitaka.org. Yes, so this is the phrase that I found down at the very end of this section under number 651. And you can scroll up a little bit. And then the last line here is the one that's a standard. It appears over and over again in various ways. So you can go up a little bit. There's a couple of different sections to it here. They're all numbered nicely on tipitaka.org. So we're talking about here the Acheka Chiwara Sika Padan. No. Yeah. So that's the name of the precept. So I use that name of the precept. That's the name of the precept in the Nisagya Pachityas. It's the Acheka Chivarasika Padang. So I searched for Acheka and I up to R because you have various case and through this, I looked down and okay, this gives various kinds of information. And then scrolling down to the very bottom after trying to read through all of that amazingly, then I came to the Katina Samutanang Akiri. And the Katina Samutanang would mean like the samutana would mean like the collection of conditions that form the basis for the arising of the katina, and then akiriyang. Kiriya is this is from the action verb kri ka, and akiriyang normally means like what's not to be done. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. What does this mean here in this case? What referring to? And this is the place then when I looked at this and then I found that these words are being used over and over again in the commentaries and sub-commentaries. And then also we find this katina samutana, then we find this in Pariwara. So there's a section in Pariwara, which is what I mentioned earlier. If you were to go to Pariwara and then 2.5, then it's called Katina Samuttanam, and that's referring to exactly this section in the Nisagya Pachityas. So there's a whole group of precepts in Nisagya Pachityas. So I could show you where that is here. You don't need to go up because the way that it's done, it won't allow you to have two windows side by side with logged into different places. But you can find it on Sutta Central, and I can show you where it's at on Sutta Central here if you want to. So on Sutta Central, then if you go to, there's a sec coming in my reading glasses. If you go to Samutana, Sisa, Sankepa, in the Mahase 2500, which in short is PLITV-EVR 3. That means Pariwara 3. And it's section 2.5 in Pariwara 3. Anyway, you don't necessarily have to know all this. This is just because there was a request for it, so I'm sharing this. But basically, my sum was, oh, there's a lot of information here that's like a level of sub-commentarial, commentarial, and Pariwara, but mostly commentarial and sub-commentarial Vinaya studies that I have not done those particular studies. Vinaya expert, so I thought, let me check with a couple of Vinaya experts and see what they say. So I checked in with Ajahn Brahm. And then also, when I checked with my Pali expert, then my Pali expert is Venerable Ananda Jyoti. And then Venerable Ananda Jyoti recommended who he thought was such a Vinaya expert, Arya Dhammika. And so then he put the question, I think anonymously, to Venerable Arya Dhammika. He challenged me to state the issue very, very briefly and succinctly. Which for anyone who knows me, that's about the highest challenge that you can give. So anyway, I did my best. And in fact, just during the break, then I heard the recorded message. I was listening to the recorded message that just arrived to me from Venerable, I think it was from Venerable Arya Dhammika. Is he German? Sounded like with a German accent to me. Little that I know. And so then I was just listening to the recording from Venerable Arya Dhammika, and I'll just share with you what Ajahn Brahm said. And then if you'd like, I don't know if we have time though, then we could listen to the recording from Venerable Arya Dhammika. But basically, Ajahn Brahm said, no way. But Ajahn Brahm said, when he said no way, he said there is no allowance for giving pavarna early, there is no allowance for leaving the vasa early, and there's no allowance for offering the katina robe early. And because I have studied those other allowances, and I'm sure I've studied, then even here in the United States, the issues come up so much because of the estas, especially. Then I know we study that all together, and then I feel so confident about that. We've used that on a number of occasions, and so have the other monastics who are really, not trying to be loosey-goosey. They're trying to be sincere and dedicated and to do properly. But I want to also mention with regards the offering of katina early under such a circumstance, and I had two examples, not only having read this precept over and over again in Pali and in English, but I had two examples in mind. And they were also not those who I thought, if they were monastics who are not much considering about Vinaya, there are so many monastics in the United States who don't keep Vinaya at all. They say, should we be doing this? The reason is to protect the crops. And United States is land of the free. And if we want to do these kind of things, we can do them in our home country. And this kind of thing I've heard many times. So there are so many monastics here in the United States who aren't trying to keep the vasa, or if they're having a katina, they're not much concerned about the Vinaya provisions for the katina so much. There are those who are using the words katina when there's just one monk, or just two, or various kinds of circumstances. It's not a Vinaya-based katina. So all these things are happening, but in the circumstances that I was mentioning, one of them was a monk of the Paok tradition, and another, I think, of either the same or another Burmese tradition here. And they were absolutely into keeping their Vinaya very strictly, is what we heard from about them. And so then they had allowed the giving of the katina robe then when they needed to leave early. And so I had that in mind as an example, and that was a powerful example that made me connect what I found and read in the precepts with the exemplary behavior of monastics who I thought were strict in Vinaya, which is why I thought that this is allowable in Vinaya to do. So there's my explanation about that. Plus, we have donors who want to be able to offer with like a sense of urgency to be able to offer to those bhikkhunis before they have to depart in these circumstances. So anyhow, I have great respect for Ajahn Brahm and his knowledge of Vinaya. But in this case, I feel like maybe he doesn't know about the 6 day early, about the allowance for giving pavarna early and departing early in case of urgency. And then could it be that he didn't know about all three of the things? So it was just a question in my mind. And so then Venerable Ananda Jyoti on my behalf consulted with Venerable Arya Dhammika and was just listening to his gracious recorded response. And I think I might have to listen to it again, but I think he's saying that probably not. That's my sum of what I think I heard. And I could be wrong. I'd have to listen more carefully again. And he is so conscientious and humble in what he is saying. which I really appreciate, to give also the benefit of the doubt or the possibility for there being something that he might not have learned or considered. And so I really appreciate that attitude that I could hear and feel in his response. My own summary of this is likewise to his. I think maybe, but my own level of poly knowledge to drill into all of the details in the commentaries and sub-commentaries in this regard is actually not enough to do that in this time. And I respect and honor the Sangha process. I want, when Sangha members have a doubt about something, whether they're a senior bhikkhuni or whether they're a new bhikkhuni or whether they're not even a bhikkhuni yet, but they're a resident and member and aspirant, I want them to be able to ask when they have, and to be able to mention it, and then how to ask well, how to ask nicely and respectfully and timely. I asked Ayasobana yesterday, I said, I have been talking about this for months now, since the beginning of Vasa. Why didn't you mention it earlier if you had a doubt about this? And she said that she just trusted me about it. And she was relying on what I was saying. So I appreciate that so much. And also I appreciate so much that then when a doubt did come up, then she mentioned it and she said so. And I just want to say again, coming back in a circle with regards to Sangha Kammas, really everyone who's participating, being on board together, is really, this is the essential meaning of it. And whether you think it's like just as a ceremony or not, but really that's the essential meaning. And Sangha Kammas also, they have their acts within the Buddhist Sangha as well. So you want to do things according to the proper legal characteristics for them. And this is the question that was particularly brought up by the senior monastic who raised the question, and that is, they had learned first the pavarana must be done and the vasa must be completed before the katina sangha karma can happen, right? So that to them is an essential characteristic, which means that has to be, that would have to be after the pavarana is already done. And if it wasn't our entire sangha, we do understand that if there's one sangha member who needs to go within 6 days before the end of the vasa, they can offer their pavarana and then can go complete their vasa and can go within those 6 days without fault. So yes to that. And my question would be then, okay, that's one. What if there are 5 of them? So this, but it's different than what our current circumstance is. I'm asking that based upon now having reviewed over this again so much in the last 2 days, especially in the last 24 hours. So what if there were 5 of them? And so then they've done their pavarana, and so they've completed their vasa, and then, but for the majority of the text that we find, other than this particular acheka chivara sika padang, it says that the katina, for the offering of the katina, that's after the katina full moon, completion of the vasa, after the pavarana is complete, that's when the katina can be offered. That's when the katina sangha karma can happen. And just to go back again, this is me like connecting the dots with what kind of things can be done in urgency, and having read over and again and heard over and again that it's possible in urgency, that's acheka, to offer the robe up to 10 days early under circumstances of urgency, including if someone needs to go, the donor wants to offer, has a sense of urgency in offering, and like someone is pregnant, and various other things that appear in the list like this, yes? So I have to say now, I am willing to be wrong. I want to be willing to be, I want to have this good mind, this good heart with regards to the Sangha, that from the youngest to the oldest, that they can properly and rightly think for themselves and consider for themselves and ask and express doubts and mention things. And I think to do so early, we always wish for that. And to do so late, we know how much more difficult that is. And so then I feel like to give even more appreciation to that, because the things that are harder to do, we normally give more appreciation to do if they're righteous things to do, if they're proper things to do, right? Like if you climb just a tiny hill, then you put up a flag, then people will be like, yay. But if you climb a big mountain and you put up a flag, then everyone's like cheering, and then the drone is flying and cheering around the world. All this kind of, because it's harder. So I want to appreciate the venerable who brought it up, and then also Ayasopana for her integrity and her response in this regard. And I think about then yesterday also I contacted our Katina donors, and as well as talking to Ayasobana. With Ayasobana, the way we left it was we went over various sources, and that I was going to check in with these Vinaya masters, and then that we would be meeting together today. And I told her, you know, there are those who are so bright among the new bhikkhunis who are studying together. They bring up and remember things and connect things that like so good many times. Then it's excellent for us to have this timely discussion together, and maybe we'll learn something more during this time. One way or another, also with our Katina donors, and I just let them know what was going on. And I thought about how to let them know this. And this is the part that for me is a little bit hard heart-wise, because like this precept, when you read the story of this precept, then this precept is all about being accommodating to the donors and the people's time. And then I think, oh, our donors and their time, especially number one. And then what seems to be the result, that is a reasonable doubt has been raised, and I'm not able, my level of study of the Pali is not enough to drill into the commentaries and sub-commentaries enough to be able to prove otherwise, to clear the doubt. So then I think, oh, meaning about the donors' time because of the what's brought up in Vinaya, then we can't accommodate all their plans. We need to change all this. Then it feels like going a bit against the grain of that meaning. But on the other hand, then also I'm sure that these donors really wish for the merits of the Katina. And in offering to our community, I am sure that they believe that we're going to be doing the Katina bona fide, authentic, properly, in a way that's in accordance with the Buddha's teaching in the Vinaya. And if people tell them afterwards that it wasn't like that, I feel sure that they would feel badly about that. And someone might even feel like they'd been gypped or cheated or something. They know us deliberately do anything like that. But also people's confidence in the Western Sangha. Here's another aspect to it that I'm just considering about now, and for entrusting the sasana with us Westerners, and our ability to learn and to follow these traditions, the canonical traditions, at least the canonical traditions, even if not commentarial or sub-commentarial, is really important to a lot of people. Ajahn Chah tradition, this is one of the great strengths, is that people really feel a lot of trust and confidence. And I've heard Thai people explicitly talking about that, and some of them even saying that they feel even more trust in these Westerners who learn from Ajahn Chah in this regard than in some of their own Thai monks. And that's really, really high praise in terms of the trusting of the sasana and with a humble mind is really important. So these are the things that I then also brought up, and also to Lal, our Dana coordinator, and our Katina donors. Then this morning, then I wrote to them, and then also to our Support Foundation president, and I wrote to her. She hasn't replied to me, but the others, one of our Katina donors hasn't either, but at least one of them has, and Lal has. And so, you know, these are the things like how to then care for this well. So I had told them earlier on with regards to fire season and with regards to COVID and us still having a pandemic, that we should be ready and prepare our minds from the very beginning, ready to change our be. But it's not because of COVID and it's not because of fire season. It's because of another reason, which I didn't prepare them for. So yes, please. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much for that. Shall we ask Sobana to unmute herself now and then see if this is a good time for discussion?
I'm unmuted, Aye.
Thank you everyone for listening to this, and I'm still actively looking at and working with what is the right balance for the way to hold and way to care best. Honest acknowledgement and appreciation and care for all of the various factors that are involved, including like the heart meaning of this precept, Nisagya Pachitya 28 or 29, really with care for the donors and their time and their wish to give, and these other elements that I mentioned. Questions, comments? Aya Pramawara.
Thank you so much, Aya Tataleka, also Aya Sobana, for this really wonderful session. And I really appreciate the flexibility that you're showing. And yeah, just like the willingness to question what's been sort of decided and be guided by, you know, sort of asking lots of different people, and then going with whatever they're suggesting. And in terms of the decision, I don't really quite fully feel I'm qualified to say anything, but I'm just really appreciating the process. Thank you.
I just want to mention with regards to consulting with the other people, my mind is not only to just go with what they've said, I'll just say that, but really to critically review and consider what they've said. And for the person who raised the criticism or the objection in the first place, also to really carefully review the points that were mentioned, not just like, oh, there's someone outside who's objecting. If there's an objection, we can't do it, or either that. So also then for Ayasobana, then as I mentioned, another element comes in, and that is because of her being co-resident bhikkhuni and because of the nature of Sangha then her genuine agreement and not asking her or anyone else to do something that they feel like really doubtful about, or they think is probably wrong. Then this part I feel is just so important. And in terms of training, I thought I want everyone to really, I felt like this is a good opportunity for training. I want everyone to really understand the rights and the responsibilities that they now have, and to also think about, it was so fortuitous that our previous topic was, which I have for the subject matter of this objection then in the communications just after finishing our Wednesday Vinaya studies. And with our Wednesday Vinaya studies in mind, what we read and like, let the venerables exonerate? No, let the venerables exhort me. Then directly after, then seeing this, now several of our bhikkhunis have their poems in Anjali, please.
Yes,
Oh, yes, please,
I just wanted to clarify that I don't, you mentioned several times about basically that it's if a person has an objection, that the importance of the person, it seems kind of personality driven. And I wonder if I did not object, or if Ayasudama didn't object, but nevertheless, having our Katina on October 17th is not allowed in the Vinaya, then we would still be in trouble. The trouble that we would be in doesn't depend on the individual personalities giving objections. It depends on whether or not our action is in accord with the Vinaya or not.
Yes, and I wasn't trying to make it about personality, but the individuals are important because each and every bhikkhuni and each and every bhikkhu does have their, as full members with full rights and responsibilities in the Sangha. These are their rights. These are their responsibilities about personality. And I hadn't mentioned who made the objection, as I really didn't want to make it about personality. So I didn't say who that senior Sangha member was. And only because you're present, then it seemed appropriate to acknowledge you and your part in this. And because we talked about that yesterday, and I thought we had an agreement about it. So we talked about it privately before coming together now at this time. So I absolutely not wanting to make it about personality. But in this case, then the point that you're raising is like, wouldn't it still be a fault? And, for myself, I've been acting in this sincerely. And I didn't think that I was asking the Sangha to do something that was a fault. And I'm still not sure. But I don't feel like I've been able to clearly clear up the doubt about it. And not being able to do that, then I feel like we shouldn't be doing something when an objection has been raised and there's a doubt about it. So would it be wrong or not if there was no objection and we went ahead? I don't know, because I was proposing something that I thought should be allowed, and I'm not sure that it's not. But I haven't been able to prove otherwise. I haven't been able to clear up the doubt. And for Venerable Arya Dhammika and all the things that he says, also, he seems to be, I feel the humility in his character, but also it seems like he's acknowledging that there may be possibilities that this, he like looking at different avenues and ways that this could be seen. The Katina has to be after the end of the Vasa. So he acknowledges that right up front. Thank you for mentioning that, and I don't see it in that way. Other circumstances, like if we were to try to, if the Bhikkhu Sangha were to try to ordain someone who is 15 years old as a Bhikkhu, and no one objects. The Vinaya clearly says in that case, they're not fully ordained, even though everyone agreed to it. So a number of kinds of cases are mentioned at Vinaya that make clear that even if everyone agrees, still it is not legal. In this case, I don't think it falls into to the same shore, which is why, having gone through the things, I feel like it's best for us to look for another date.
Thank you, A.
There's a suggestion to pass around the mic. And what did you say? Pass around the mic, Anne. This is pass around the mic to share your thought about this.
So I'm it seems so important just to keep also the harmony, and if there are unclear things, better clear with time, and maybe for the next occasion we have we have been cleared and can yes. Yeah, I don't know. Also in the because we have a short time left until the Katina, maybe it's just better to go with changing the dates and letting the people feel really comfortable with it and research it with time, and yes, that would be my
Thank you very much, and I'll just let know that we did look at one possible date while you were still here after the Pavarna, which would be the 22nd, but it's a Friday, and that's a date that for traffic, it's really hard for people to come and go. And then we looked at all the other weekend dates for the remainder of the Katina season, and they're all filled up with our close associates Katinas. So other than perhaps the 23rd, which is you're going to be departing in the early dawn. So we did look at that. Let me pass the mic now further.
So, if it is possible to change the date, I feel better about changing the date.
So appreciate the process that is going into this and just watching this happen. And I too agree that if the date needs to be changed, that we just change the date. And I'm fully in agreement with that. I kind of wish you were able to be here, but I support this process.
Thank you, Aya, for your understanding, and I, together with the Sangha, we can change.
It's an interesting process. I will also have to be leaving as well, so I won't be here. So. Although if Karuna Buddhist Vihara does come, then I guess I would be, because I'm going to other ones with them. So.
So I'd like to check in now also with yes. So that if it were on the 23rd, that would enable you to be here with us for hours and then go directly with them to Karuna Buddhist Vihara and participate in theirs. So let's hear, if the 23rd worked for them, let's hear from Aya Brahmawara.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really good to change the date. I guess that's the consensus, and I'm actually kind of, yeah. I mean, I don't think I'll be around for the Katina, but I'm rather hoping I might be able to come back in November because my dad's doing so well, and early November. And if the Katina's later, then I'll enjoy being around for the Katina, but probably it would have happened already.
Excuse me, Aya. Aya Suchita gave me her chanda about this. And I did discuss it with her.
My distance glasses on, but I can see it now. Aya, how about for yourself?
I agree with moving it to another date after the Kartika full moon. And I would like to learn to read those Pali commentarial texts to see if we could find, in future, if we could find a different understanding of it. But that seems to be what's required, is the things that I'm able to read.
Sadhu, thank you very much. I also agree with finding a different date, and I also agree and am interested in further studies over time to see what more I can understand or glean about this. I think one of the wonderful things about the situation that we're in, the accessibility of the texts and the teachings to us now, is that we're able to develop discerning the vibhaja, and we're able to access the canonical texts ourselves, not only just through the teaching of specific. So I think we have a wonderful opportunity in this regard, not only to follow one tradition or another tradition, but to study deeply and to be choiceful and discerning. And so I see this as being our opportunity in this and many regards, and this being a wonderful opportunity for us. And very good to practice what we were talking about in our last session as well. And so fortunate in timing. So fortuitous in timing in that regard, wise. So then especially Ayasobana's support and her contact for the process. I've meant to get Buddhist monks robes, but really meant for the well-being and happiness of the donors. So maybe well-being and happiness all around. So to keep this in mind, and we'll look out for when may be the other most suitable date. Does anyone want to hear the recording from, we think it's from Venerable Arya Dhammika? Now our time is passing.
Perhaps we don't have enough time, Aya. We need to break in 2
Yes.
minutes, and we should have a closing blessing.
Yes. just want to express my appreciation then to everyone for both, especially for Ayasopana, for preparing such an amazing outline and resources for all of us for our studies, our theoretical study in the first part. Also, she said she's expressed her willingness to lead up in Katina robe sewing practicum, upcoming for all who are with us during the Katina time. And also today, she expressed her willingness to tutor the new bhikkhunis in assisting in Kamawata in the Sangha Kama for Katina, which is a great offering. And to everyone for their contribution together. And how wonderful that we may be able to have Aya Pramawara back with us in November. All things being permanent and uncertain, I really like the idea of when we have Anuvedita go away, although we like her to stay as well, and then having Aya Pramawara also come back. So Ayasopane, would you like to lead in a blessing and dedication?
Yes, and before that, I want to acknowledge that every question did not get answered, and to really encourage people, if you have time, to look over that document and to use the comment on the Google document to ask questions. If there's things in there that are actually unclear, and then by having a dialogue that's built around a document with a set of citations, we could create a document that future generations can look at. The questions that you have are similar to the questions that future people will also have. And so it's really wonderful. If anything did not get answered today, if we could have a chance to try to get it answered in the document. So with my greatest appreciation for, especially for Ayatataloka in the gracious and proper way of handling this unusual question that came along in the past couple of days. So we've had a practicum in how to cope with disputes, in addition to have a chance to learning about a subject matter. Dukkha patta chanin dukkha, bhaya patta chanim bhaya, soka patta chanis soka, ontu same pipanino. Shall we Araham? Sambuddha
Buddhaṃ bhagavaṃ Bhagavatam Dhammam Namassami. Bhagavato Sangho Sangham Well. When he's so penetrated, it's just we didn't have the mic, that's right. I thought the mic had changed.
Well, the new mic might not be picking up very well.
About that. So, yes.
Well, we should
Take this one.
wait. So I think we'll move on to our next program.
Bye. Good night. Be joining us for Monk with Ajahn Brahm.
I think I will actually. I'm wide awake. It was so great inspiration in the last session.
Thank you so much for being together with us for this part.
Thank you.
Early November. I think that there's a YouTube link for the monk
Yes,
chat.
I sent that earlier.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay. All
And a book
right.
China.
Well, everyone, good time. Alright, we'll see you again on monk chat. Please be back before 4:30. I know it's soon. Let's all be assembled together in time.
Okay, so I